Once you've laid out all your blocks, then it's going to be time to join them together into your quilt top. And that's what I'm talking about today. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, podragi, and embroidery. So once you've decided on your layout for your quilt, it's going to be time to join them together into your quilt top. And so I have some of my blocks laid out here so you can see, but you're going to have all your blocks laid out either on the floor, on a bed, somewhere where you can see all of them laid out. And I've decided to go with the 5x7 layout, so I'm going to be making a rectangular quilt. And so I have 5 blocks across and 7 rows of 5. Now joining the blocks is actually not very difficult. We're just going to sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam, and that same 1/4 inch seam that you've used in the whole quilt and you've been practicing and getting good at, we're doing the same 1/4 inch seam. The thing that is the most complicated is when you pick up your blocks and you take it to the sewing machine, remembering how you're going to sew them together. What orientation do you sew them? Because it's really easy to pick them up, carry them over, and then it's like, oh no, how do they go together? So here's what I do to help with this. Now there are a few different solutions and you might find different quilters do different things and you might have your own idea. But the main thing is to just keep them organized. So what I will do is I'll come along and take all of the first column and I will flip it over and then I'll put a little pin in this side. And I'm not perfectly aligning it and pinning it for joining. I'm just putting in a pin so when I get to the sewing machine, I know this is the side I have to sew. When I'm at the sewing machine, then I'll take that pin out and then I will line it up and make sure I'm sewing it right. So this isn't a pin for accuracy. This is just a pin so I remember this is the side that I'm sewing together. And then on the next row, I'll flip that over and put a pin there. And then I can pile them together because I'll know that I'm stitching on this side on all the pairs that I have. And I'll do that all the way down, all 7 rows. And then in the next one, I will turn 3 over number 4 and put a pin in that, and then etc. Now, because I'm doing the 5x7, my last row, row 5, it doesn't have a pair. If you were doing 6x6, you could do 5 over 6, but this one has 5 by itself, so I'm just gonna leave those laid out until I've sewed the rest of them together, and then I can come back to that. Now, some people, they prefer to label them. So they could label them 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, etc., 2A, 2B, etc. So then if any block, if you drop something and you found it on the floor, you would immediately know where that went in the quilt. And that's a good option, but you also need to know the orientation of the block. So if I pick this one up, knowing that it's 2C is not necessarily going to help me because when I'm joining it, I need to know, do I join it this way? Do I join it this way? I know it's going to be one vertical and one horizontal, but how do I know which way? So if you're labeling, you might want to label them all at the top corner or have something else to indicate the orientation of the blocks. And I got that one switched around. When in doubt, just lay them out again or refer to the picture that you took of it. So I'm going to join my blocks into pairs and then you're going to see what it will look like. So once you've joined these blocks into pairs, you're going to have these little groups of 2 and you're probably going to want to lay them out again just to double check the orientation and see which ones go in which rows. Now in these pairs, you're going to want to press the seams towards this solid piece. So it's pressed away from these pieces onto that one. And that is because, as we can see on the back, that means that these seams are pressed that way. We can see if we press the other way, then that's pressing those seams back onto themselves, and that will leave a little bit more bulk. And so if you have some that are pressed that way, it's not the end of the world, but it's going to be a flatter project if you press it that way. So you're going to lay them out again. So once they're laid out and you see how they are, then you're going to join them together into a row. And so if you're doing 5 like I am, you have 2, 2, and 1. And if you're doing the 6 by 6 layout, then you'll have 2, 2, 2. But whichever way you have, you're going to have 2 more seams. So you'll sew that seam together and then that seam, and then you will have a row. And this is what your final row will look like. And you're going to have 2 different rows. There's going to be the odd number rows, 1, 3, 5, and 7 if you have it. And then the even number rows are going to be a little bit different because those are the alternate rows. So we can see here we have our 2 rows, and lay them out and just double check to make sure that you have that step design on the quilt or whatever layout you chose. And now we're going to just join the rows together. So to join the rows together, this is a time when you might want to use pins. Now we know that we're going to put them right sides together, and here's where the 2 blocks will come together. And we can feel with our fingers, because we press the seams towards the plain fabric, we can feel that this seam is pressed this direction and this seam is pressed that direction. And so we can see at the part where they come together, we can kind of feel with our fingers that they kind of butt up against each other. But if you want to hold them extra securely, then you can put a pin right in that spot to help hold it together. And then we can go down and find the next seam between the blocks, and we can line that up and put in a little pin. And then we can do that on all 4 or 5 of the seams, and it will just be different depending on if you're doing the 5 by 7 or if you're doing the 6 by 6. So once you put the pins in, that will just help it stay lined up when you take it to the sewing machine. Then you'll go to the sewing machine and you will stitch a 1/4 inch seam all along this whole piece. And take the pins out as you go. Don't sew over top of the pins. Take them out as you go, and when you're done, you will have your piece that looks like this. So now I have 2 rows sewn together, and you're just going to repeat that process to sew all the rows together. And anytime you're confused about which direction things get sewn together, just lay it out again and double check to make sure that you have the design. Taking the time to do that will often mean that you don't have to rip things out. So once all the rows have been joined together, you have your final quilt top, and you're ready to move on and turn this into a finished quilt. Now, hopefully everything went together just the way you planned and the way you wanted it to go together. But when you have it done, I encourage you to lay it out, take a picture, and look at it in the picture, because sometimes we notice things in a photograph that we don't notice when we're looking at it in real life and up close. And just see if there's anything that got turned the wrong way or anything that you would like to change. Now, if something went together a way that you didn't plan, you do have a choice. You can either choose to take apart that section and reassemble it, or you can just call it your own creative design feature and leave it in. It's totally up to you. But before you move on to the next step, just make sure that you're happy with how everything is put together. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the options of finishing this and turning it into a quilt. So for more quilting patterns and tutorials, you can check out my website, epidastudio.com.